January 1540. Henry VIII stands face to face with his fourth wife for the first time. Anne of Cleves has traveled from Germany to marry the King of England, sealing a crucial political alliance. But as Henry looks at the woman he is contractually obligated to marry, his face turns white with horror. This is not the beautiful princess he had been promised. This is not the woman whose portrait had convinced him to propose marriage sight unseen. This woman standing before him looks nothing like the painting that had sealed their engagement. Henry turns to his advisors with barely controlled rage. "I like her not," he whispers through gritted teeth. But the marriage contracts have been signed. The political alliance is already announced. Backing out now would be an international humiliation that could trigger war with Germany. Henry is trapped for the first time in his life. The king who had rewritten the laws of marriage itself finds himself caught in a web of his own making, and his solution will prove that even Henry VIII can learn new ways to destroy the women in his life. If you think Henry's previous marriages were disasters, you haven't seen anything yet. Subscribe now, because we're about to witness the king's most embarrassing failure and his most creative revenge. The story of Henry's fourth marriage begins with his desperate need for international allies. By 1539, England stood isolated in Europe. Catholic powers France and Spain had made peace with each other and were threatening to unite against Protestant England. Henry faced a real possibility of invasion from two directions simultaneously. Thomas Cromwell, Henry's chief minister, had a solution. The Duchy of Cleves in Germany was Protestant, but not aligned with either France or Spain. A marriage alliance with Duke William of Cleves would give England a powerful ally right in the heart of Europe. It was brilliant diplomacy, provided the marriage itself succeeded. Duke William had two unmarried sisters. Sibylla was considered the more beautiful, but she was already promised to another German prince, and the younger sister was available. At 24, she was past the ideal marriage age for a princess, but still young enough to bear children. Henry had learned from his previous marriage disasters to be more careful about his choice of wives. He demanded detailed reports about Anne's appearance, personality, education, and most importantly, her fertility. The reports that came back were encouraging. Anne was described as tall, fair, and pleasant-looking. She was healthy and came from a family known for producing many children. But Henry wanted more than diplomatic reports. He commissioned Hans Holbein, the greatest portrait painter in Europe, to travel to Cleves and paint Anne's likeness. Holbein's portraits of Henry himself had become iconic images of royal power. Surely his depiction of Anne would give Henry an accurate sense of his potential bride. Holbein's portrait of Anne of Cleves showed a dignified young woman with fair skin, blonde hair, and serious but pleasant features. She wore rich German court dress and looked every inch a princess. Henry was satisfied. Here was a woman who appeared suitable for marriage to the King of England. What Henry didn't understand was that Holbein was a professional court painter, whose job was to make his subjects look as attractive and dignified as possible. The portrait was not a photograph. It was an idealized version of and designed to facilitate the marriage negotiation. Holbein had done his job too well. Marriage negotiations proceeded rapidly through 1539. The political situation in Europe was deteriorating quickly, and Henry needed the German alliance secured before France and Spain could coordinate their threatened invasion. Terms were agreed upon, and would receive generous settlements, and would become Queen of England upon marriage. December 1539, Anne of Cleves departed from Germany for England. The journey was arduous, taking weeks through winter weather and rough seas, and had never been outside Germany before. She spoke no English. She knew nothing about English customs or court life. She was traveling blind into marriage with a man she had never met. Henry's excitement about his upcoming marriage was obvious to his courtiers. He spoke frequently about Anne's beauty, based entirely on Holbein's portrait. He planned elaborate wedding celebrations. He even composed music in honor of his bride-to-be. For the first time since Jane Seymour's death, Henry seemed genuinely optimistic about marriage. January 1540, Anne's ship finally reached England after a voyage delayed by winter storms. Henry was so eager to meet his bride that he broke with royal protocol. Instead of waiting for the formal presentation ceremony, he decided to surprise Anne with an impromptu visit. While she was still recovering from her journey, Henry disguised himself as a messenger and burst into Anne's temporary lodgings unannounced. In romantic literature, such surprise meetings between future spouses were supposed to result in instant love and mutual recognition. Henry had read too many romantic stories and believed his own propaganda about royal marriages. The reality was catastrophic. Anne, exhausted from travel and unfamiliar with English customs, had no idea who this strange man was when Henry revealed his identity. Expecting delight and attraction, Anne's reaction was polite but clearly unenthusiastic. She showed no signs of the instant infatuation Henry had expected. But far worse, from Henry's perspective, was his own reaction to seeing it in person. Whatever Holbein's portrait had promised, the reality was devastatingly different. And was not ugly, but she was plain in a way that the flattering portrait had completely concealed. She seemed older than her 24 years. Her manner was serious and Germanic, lacking the vivacity Henry preferred in women. Henry's disappointment was immediately obvious to everyone present. His face went through a series of expressions, from anticipation to shock to barely concealed disgust. Anne, despite not understanding English customs, could clearly read Henry's reaction. The marriage was doomed before it had even begun. Henry retreated from Anne's presence as quickly as possible and immediately summoned Thomas Cromwell. "I like her not," he told his chief minister bluntly. "I like her not at all. How shall I be able to go through with this marriage when I find her so different from what was promised?" Cromwell was horrified. He had staked his political career on the success of this German alliance. The marriage contracts were signed. Anne's family and the German princes were expecting the wedding to proceed. Canceling now would destroy England's credibility and leave the country defensively isolated. But Henry was beyond reason. He felt betrayed by Holbein's portrait, tricked into an engagement based on false advertising. He blamed Cromwell for arranging the marriage. He blamed Anne for not being beautiful enough. He blamed everyone except himself for the situation he now faced. January 6, 1540. Despite Henry's private revulsion, the royal wedding proceeded as planned. Henry went through the ceremony with visible reluctance, his face a mask of barely concealed distaste, and aware of her husband's attitude, but powerless to change it. Maintained her dignity throughout the proceedings. The marriage was a disaster from the wedding night onward. Henry later claimed that he had been unable to consummate the marriage because of his physical revulsion toward Anne. Whether this was true or simply a convenient excuse for annulment proceedings, it became the foundation for the marriage's swift destruction. Henry's treatment of Anne during their brief marriage was cruel but calculated. He avoided her company whenever possible. He refused to include her in important court ceremonies. He made no effort to help her learn English or adapt to English customs. He was clearly hoping that neglect and humiliation would convince Anne to request an annulment herself. Anne, despite her difficult situation, handled Henry's rejection with remarkable grace and intelligence. She made no public complaints about her treatment. She attempted to learn English and English customs despite receiving no help from Henry. She maintained her dignity even as it became obvious to the entire court that her marriage was a failure. Meanwhile, Henry's attention was already wandering to other women at court. Catherine Howard, a young cousin of Anne Boleyn, had caught his eye. Catherine was everything and was not. Young, vivacious, flirtatious, and English, she represented. Escape from the German marriage Henry now desperately wanted to end. By spring 1540, Henry was actively seeking ways to annul his marriage to Anne. The problem was that, unlike his previous marriages, this one had been arranged purely for political reasons. There were no convenient theological arguments about forbidden relationships. The marriage was legally and religiously valid. Henry's solution was characteristically creative and ruthless. He would claim that the marriage had never been properly consummated, making it invalid in the eyes of both church and state. Anne's dignified behavior throughout their marriage made this claim implausible. But Henry no longer cared about plausibility. Thomas Cromwell, who had arranged the German marriage, found himself in an impossible position. Henry blamed him for the disaster and was clearly seeking a scapegoat for his own poor judgment. Cromwell's enemies at court sensed weakness and began plotting his downfall. The marriage that was supposed to secure his position was instead destroying it. June 1540. Henry moved decisively to end both his marriage and Cromwell's career. Cromwell was arrested on charges of treason and heresy. The timing was not coincidental. Henry needed Cromwell eliminated before he could proceed with the annulment, as Cromwell knew too much about the king's real motivations. July 1540, Henry's marriage to Anne of Cleves was officially annulled by a specially convened church court. The grounds were non-consummation and Anne's alleged pre-contract to another German prince. Both reasons were legally questionable, but no one dared challenge Henry's determination to end the marriage. Anne's reaction to the annulment was surprisingly pragmatic. She accepted Henry's terms without protest, perhaps recognizing that resistance would only bring danger. In exchange for her cooperation, Henry granted her a generous settlement, multiple properties, and an honorary position as his beloved sister. Anne of Cleves had become the first of Henry's wives to survive their marriage intact. She had learned the most important lesson of all when dealing with Henry VIII. Strategic surrender was sometimes the path to survival. Her willingness to accept annulment without resistance saved her life and secured her future. Henry's fourth marriage had lasted exactly 6 months. It was his shortest and least successful marriage, a diplomatic disaster that had cost him his most capable minister and damaged England's reputation across Europe. But from Henry's perspective, it had one crucial benefit. It was the first marriage he had ended without bloodshed. The German alliance that the marriage was supposed to secure crumbled along with the marriage itself. The Duke of Cleves was insulted by his sister's treatment and refused further cooperation with England. Henry's isolation in European politics was now complete, leaving England vulnerable to the Catholic powers that surrounded it. Anne of Cleves, meanwhile, settled into a comfortable retirement in England. She learned to speak English fluently, adapted to English customs, and even developed a cordial relationship with Henry's children. Of all Henry's wives, she alone had found a way to navigate the king's dangerous temperament and emerge unscathed. The failure of Henry's fourth marriage revealed several crucial aspects of his character. His vanity had blinded him to the realities of political marriage. His inability to accept responsibility for his own poor judgment had cost him his most effective advisor. His willingness to destroy international alliances for personal convenience showed how completely his private desires now dominated state policy. Thomas Cromwell paid the ultimate price for Henry's matrimonial disaster. Despite years of faithful service, despite his crucial role in establishing Henry's supremacy over the English Church, despite his skill in managing Parliament and foreign policy, Cromwell was executed in July 1540. His crime was not treason or heresy, but the unforgivable sin of arranging a marriage that displeased the king. But even as Henry celebrated his escape from the German marriage, he was already planning his fifth wedding. Catherine Howard was young, beautiful, and eager to please. She seemed like the perfect antidote to the disasters of Anne of Cleves. Henry convinced himself that this time, finally, he had found the wife who would bring him lasting happiness. He was wrong again, but this time, his mistake would cost not just his own happiness, but the life of another young woman who would discover that being desired by Henry VIII was often more dangerous than being rejected by him. Next time, we'll witness Henry's most tragic marriage yet. Catherine Howard will learn that the king's love is conditional, his mercy is non-existent, and his definition of treason includes any behavior that wounds his massive ego. The girl who thought she could charm Henry into happiness will instead charm herself to the executioner's block.